today's topic is about operations resilience. So, there was a fireside chat yesterday. It was a pretty informative one between Gaurav and the head of risk for Barclays on operations resilience. So I don't think, I'm pretty sure most of you would agree, resilience is no longer a buzzword, right? I mean, it's a reality. So I'll probably, I initially thought, to get started with a couple of slides on just current market situation and how the risks are connected. So I don't want to bore you to death because you heard that in the last 2 days already. So let me get quickly into disruptions and the business, and just to kind of give a context a little bit, right? So we're all coming out of pandemic. So when it started, probably in 2020, early 2020, I still remember when the shelter in place was imposed, on all of us. Everybody was figuring out, what should I do? I mean, schools were figuring out, how to teach kids, and restaurants were figuring out, how will I, earn the livelihood, right? And us also, I think most of us were in that sense in IT were still okay. We used to working from home, bit up here and there. We were able to kind of manage to back to working in a very quick time press. But if you really see from the organization's point of view, and think about some of the the restaurant example that I took. Some of the restaurants did really come out of it in a way where they started offering, takeouts, right? That's their way of handling, how do I say, getting back to normalcy. I won't say normalcy, but still sustaining through that specific situation itself altogether, right? I think most of us today, what we're going to talk about from the organization point of view or resiliency point of view is about that. So are we prepared in order to recover from the impact of a disruption or living through that specific phase itself altogether? How efficiently can we do it, and how can we prep for it? I think that's going to be the context of today's discussion. So there are two parts here. One is there are when you say disruptions, there are cyber attack, computation, litigations. These are ongoing. I mean, I don't think we can really call them as black swan events or anything like that. So that's business as usual. There are certain things like pandemic or force majeure. Pandemic, you can probably call it. I hope it is not going to be a recurring phenomenon. It's once in 50 years or 100 years. Let it stay that way. But you never know, right? If you really talk to Bill Gates and the way if you read his articles and stuff, he says, guys, it's coming. Be ready for it, right? So that's the truth. So how do we manage, the entire operations, the three key components of the operations, right? People, process, and technology from that angle. How do we kind of use the power of that, or how do we ensure the continuity of the operation through these disruptions and recover from that really fast and get back to business the way we are, right? So that's going to be more from, it is extremely important from the business resiliency perspective. So you can't avoid disruptions. What we can do is prepare for it, right? Now, what is operation resilience? By definition, if you go, it's kind of well laid out in that sense. It's about having a structured approach where, you can respond, retrospect, and course correct, in a way where, you move forward as an answer to these disruptions. That's going to be the more like an operational resilience. How is it different than business continuity? Because we all used to talk about the same thing. Business continuity is about, hey, you have a business continuity plan in place for me to kind of respond to any specific events that happen. How do I respond to it? How is it resilience different from the business continuity? If you really look at, we all, somewhere or the other, I'm pretty sure we have seen the business continuity plans. They're more focused upon communication, extremely important, no doubt about it. But again, it's more related to, I don't think they take the customer service, aspect of it or the critical business service aspect of it that clearly. It's more process or asset independent. They're pretty much in silos. I'm creating a continuity plan for a particular application or an asset. I'm creating a particular continuity plan for a process. But think about a business service. What is a business service? Just to kind of align what I'm talking about, right? So when we talk about critical business service, which is a concept that I think it was existed, but it kind of more become apparent with operational resiliency, is in, for example, retail banking. If you have an operation where we go to a bank and I want to open an account, or I want to make a transaction, it's going to be like teller driven and stuff like that. So that entire experience itself, if I have to say, from the banking perspective, I can call that as a critical service or a critical business service that I'm providing. So there are customers that are walking in to my branch, I'm servicing them one way or the other, from the retail banking perspective. That entire thing is a critical business service. That's how I'm getting deposits. That's how we're able to kind of take that money, invest or lend it, and make that's my business at the end of the day. So that's a critical business for me. When you look at that, there are multiple processes attached to it. There are multiple systems linked to it. So, for example, if my loan application, the system that I'm using in order to take the details of the customer or what kind of a loan that they're applying, if that system is not working, I cannot service the customer. At the same time, for the branch itself, for whatever the reasons, I'm unable to provide that specific complete experience for the user. The entire business process is going to get impacted. So when you really call, this is what is called as critical business service. So there are multiple applications, multiple processes, they're linked together. Do you have a visibility of all of that in one way, where you can make sense of, okay, what, this is how they're interlinked. If this specific application doesn't work, or the communication system doesn't work, or this process breaks, or this person doesn't come to the office, whatever that particular thing is, what is going to be its impact on the customer experience itself altogether, or on the business as a whole. So that's why the definition of critical business system, that comes into picture. It's a group of processes, it's a group of applications, there may be third parties involved on all of those specific dependencies itself. It's very important for you to kind of understand that concept, really well, from the business resiliency perspective. Some of the key drivers, right? Like, again, taking a step back, there is a new competition. There are disruptive business models. We also talked about the different kinds of disruptions and everything. There is also a constant regulatory change. I think Gavin was talking about in the earlier session today. He said, I leave it up to you, he considers regulators as the threat actors, more in that sense, right? It's a very good analogy in that sense. So all of these are something that will lead up to some kind of a disruption. So there are, whether it's about expanding to new markets, launching non-traditional products, all of these specific things, if you really see, they lead up to one or the other kind of risks that is associated with it. When you see, the compounded impact of all of these specific risks that bear on a wider economy, that's exactly is the force behind resilience. How do I continue through disruptions or through these specific risks? That's why these are some of the key drivers I can say behind the operational resilience. Now, there is an increased regulatory focus in the world. I think you all have heard about DORA, which is the Digital Operational Resilience Act, which is from European Commission. That was probably the more like a time when operational resiliency become more of a talking point, everywhere, and especially in Europe. But I'm pretty sure, every other banking regulatory authority that is, whether it's a PRA, whether it is FSB, or whether it is the control of currency, everybody has some or the other way mentioned about operational resiliency for the banks, in their guidances. And I'm pretty sure DORA is the first act, which is kind of coming into effect. Same thing will happen with any of the banking regulators that are out there in the world. They're going to start enforcing more and more on the resilience piece. So with this increased regulation, I don't think we have an option, but to get our acts right, more from the operational resiliency point of view. So I'm going to talk a little bit more, right after like a couple of slides in terms of getting through these scenario, what I can say, events that happened and how the resiliency really helped, or one way or the other, like helped or not helped in that specific sense, if they're not prepared. I'm going to get into those specifics of the process itself. So first, let's take a look at colonial pipeline attack. So I think we all are aware about what happened, right? Like it's a cyber attack that led up to, that shut down pretty much, the colonial pipeline in the state of Texas. And it's a ransomware group basically which did it. And what happened after that is there was a widespread gasoline shortages in that area, and that increased the price up, right? Significantly. Now, if you really see, can you expect a cyber attack to happen? And if you don't expect, I think there is something seriously wrong with it, especially in this particular scenario. We've been talking about cyber risk all along in the last 2 days. You have to be expecting, you have to have guardrails. But if it happens, how do you respond to it? That process also has to be ready, from that point of view, right? So the lessons that we learned, from the colonial pipeline cyber attack, or how we responded, how the organization responded to that specific thing, is about critical infrastructure. The way we define. There is also a concept of ICTs. Critical infrastructure systems, they are very vulnerable to cyber attacks, and especially with state-sponsored, what I can say, actors, being especially targeting government installations or defense facilities and stuff like that. It's even more relevant, especially in order to kind of make their voice heard, or get some money, or whether it's whatever it is, like more from that angle. There will always going to be some or the other sort of an attack that will keep on happening on the infrastructure. So the important part is how do they are vulnerable, there is no doubt about it. And also it's also very important for these particular infrastructure to have a very high and a strong kind of a cyber security measures in place in order to deal with the situations. First one is to reduce the likelihood, and the second one is, if it happens, how do I kind of respond to it? And the third thing is public and private sector. Colonial pipeline was kind of operated by the private sector, but what is the kind of coordination between the public and private sector, more in terms of not just from the response perspective, but also in terms of providing that intelligence, in order to kind of make sure, appropriate, controls are in place in order to kind of avoid such situations and everything. This is one example where there was no strong operational resilience in place. Then there is one more. This is back in the days. We're all aware about Japan, tsunami, right? Like when it happened, 9 foot, waves, and the kind of a disruption that it created. But there were 3 nuclear, plants that were out, in Japan. Out of all of 3 of them were kind of similarly prepared, I would say. Sorry, not prepared, but they had a what I would say, the similar kind of a distance from the place where this actual event happened, and the impact was also kind of pretty much similar, more in terms of the wave impact I'm talking about. But if you really see, the Fukushima plant, which is out there, which is had a significant meltdowns and also radiation leakage compared to the Onagawa plant, which is in fact 40 miles closer, as well as the epicenter was closer to the actual earthquake place, the epicenter, but it was undamaged. Why was it? The reason for that is the Onagawa plant, they had a proactive and collaborative culture of safety and risk awareness, and it was from top to bottom. So every person in the plant, they were aware that in a situation like this, because Japan is prone to earthquakes, and they were expecting one or the other way, these things will happen, and tsunami is also one of the side effects of that in that sense. So they were prepared from top to bottom, and also there were strict protocols that were present for the disaster response. What to do, who is responsible, those kind of strategy was very well laid down. So I think that was the reason why I think the damage was much lower compared to what happened in the Fukushima, the nuclear plant. So the 2 examples that talk about, one from the preparation point of view, how it can really recover from such a huge destruction in that sense, or how can you respond to such a kind of a situation where you can minimize the damage significantly? And the second one is more in terms of where I'm not prepared. Yeah, I'm exposed more from that angle. So I just thought these are the two good examples to kind of highlight importance of resilience. There are 2 points with respect to operational resilience. One is your ability to absorb the disruption, which is about this is what you call it as how much cushion do you have in order to take that impact, right? And the second one is about recoverability. So those are the two important aspects of operational resilience. When you say preparedness, first one you're focusing upon, hey, let me absorb the disruption, which is about minimizing the impact as such. And the second one is how quickly can I recover from this situation and move on? I'll get back to the business, right? Those are the two important factors from the operational resilience. Now how do I go about as an organization? How do I prepare for it, right? What should I do? What are the different components that are involved? I'm kind of getting into the next stage of it, which is about I talked about critical business services, which is about identify every business service cannot be critical. Critical business service is something that is bringing you revenue for your organization at the end of the day. Whether it's retail banking, I talked about that specific example. For any other company, it may be something else, right? So identify those specific critical business services first. That is the first and foremost step. And as I said, every service cannot be, a critical service. You cannot have what I can say, a plan built in a way. It's as good as probably running a parallel business or a parallel company. Altogether. Somebody was saying that yesterday. It's impossible to run two companies. What if this fails? I'm going to get onto the other one, right? It's not possible. So identify those critical business services and then the established dependencies. What are the critical processes, assets, third parties, people? All of those things that are linked to it. Get a view of that specific thing. Then only it is possible to understand the interdependencies really well and put a plan in place. So that is the second step. And third thing is about tolerances, setting up a tolerance. Hey, if the system goes down by 2 hours, is that something, can I recover from it? Is it 3 hours? The RPOs concept that is there for the processes. Understand and put a tolerance for these specific, what I can say, business services. And then you have to identify different scenarios of the failure and then test upon them, which is basically the drills that we conduct in the business continuity world. So you simulate those specific things, try and make sure your plan is working in that specific sense, and you're able to achieve those specific levels of RPOs or RTOs that you're talking about from the process point of view in order to move forward. And then you analyze those particular findings and build resilience. Now, let me quickly touch upon the different process components. I'm not sure if you can really read it through. So there are, if you talk about, I'm just going to be kind of focusing upon, starting off here. Once you identify the critical business services and map those different dependencies, this may be about the assets, the applications that I talked about, process. It may be about all of the different risk assessment data, the third parties, people data. All of that is an input at the end of the day. One is the dependencies. When you're conducting what we call it as a business impact of assessment on these critical services, all of the risk assessment, control failure, issues, that data becomes an input in order for you to come up with how do you respond kind of a plan, altogether, right? So this is a typical flow in terms of what are the different components that are involved, what are the inputs in order to kind of establishing that mapping and then coming up with the specific plan that you are going to test and kind of improve upon, right? And it also involves the typical issue management, which is about identify all of those specific gaps or the issues, how do I address them, and in case of the incidents and the observations that you have, when will they lead up to the crisis and how do I manage them? That's all part of the drill, that you kind of conduct, whether it's very similar to how we do the fire drills and stuff like that, a similar kind of a thing more from the disruptions simulation perspective. Now, from the MetricStream product offering perspective, what we have, considering there is risk assessment data that is already available, we do have a foundational GRC libraries, which is the federated data model that we use to map all the different objects together, which comes in really handy more from dependency mapping and capturing those critical business services perspective. That's going to be the core of it. Like, the first part that I talk about on the left side, which is the critical business services, ICTs, and the dependencies. Now, there are three components as they're kind of laid out. One is the business continuity management, another one is op risk, and the third one is the third party risk. Op risk, which also involves the cyber, because that's a critical aspect of it. You need to know threat and vulnerabilities, the cyber risk associated with it, because there are applications that are involved, they are part of a critical infrastructure, and they may be directly influencing or impacting your business services. Now, the solution itself is built. It's a combination of three different products, op risk, business continuity, and third party management. While the important aspect is the ability that we provide in terms of how do you identify critical business services and map them. That view is the critical view, and then how all this particular data comes together that will help you in terms of putting together the response plan or the business continuity plan, and then create the drills, simulate them, record those specific results, and how do you manage that particular information to improve upon further. So that's going to be the a solution. While all of this specific functionality is built in, I'll be happy to kind of provide operational resiliency product demo itself. If you guys are interested, we can definitely do that. I didn't have much time. I thought I'll just cover the concept part first before getting into the product and say hey, this is how the product would look like, because it's important to understand the concept. What is the difference between business continuity and the operational resiliency? So with that, that's pretty much my last slide. So if you have any questions, I'll take it. And it's time, Murtaza, is it? Okay. Is there a question?
So the operational resilience, is that going to be a separate module, or are you saying it's a compilation of those three plus cyber?
It's a product. It's definitely a separate product, but it uses the components from all of them in a way, without doing business continuity management or op risk. What you get out of operations is very important. So it is important that that information feeds in, and you use that specific intelligence in order to build your plans, business impact assessments, and then test them out. So
is that available now, or is that future?
It's available. We started doing. You want to take that?
Yes, available now.
Yeah.
So my company, we have the application business continuity management, operational, and third-party management. Do I have to buy another application that is the operation resilience?
Absolutely. When I say buy, it uses most of the components. It uses most of the components, but there is new things in that, especially from the critical business services that we talked about, and how it brings all of that specific information together for you to kind of be more efficient with respect to crisis management and improve upon it further. But it's not going to, I would put it this way, it's probably not going to cost you the same money as somebody who's buying new. That's what I can say.
Okay, so in order to have the operation resilience, I would have to have 4 products, 4 applications.
If you buy operational resilience, you're automatically taking care of the dependent modules.
Okay.
Since you already have 3, it's as I mentioned, you don't have to spend a lot of money in order to kind of get the other things. So that's how I put it as compared to new.
All right, I think we're out of time.